if my day started like this every day in a breakfast with you four, I think I'd be quite happy. But to kick off, it'd be great for us to perhaps discover some of the different phases of starting a project and getting it off the ground. Camille, you are a little bit further towards the beginning of your journey. You're at the sort of early stage part of Bloom, and you have a very deep global finance issue that you are really pushing hard to tackle. So what I'm interested to hear, and I'd love to hear your thoughts as well, is some of those key boundaries that really exist at those beginning stages of getting an idea off the ground. So if we have someone like Taj telling us we can work a side hustle, and you want to get out there from 4 a.m. to 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. till 10 p.m. every day, as I'm sure all of you are nodding as I'm going to do that. What are some of those key barriers that you've come up against, and how have you worked around them?
Where do I start? So many. First of all, English is not my first language. That was one of the first hurdle. Finance is not my background. I haven't been trained in that space. I'm I guess a female founder, so entering a very male-dominated space. And it's my first company. So all these were a lot of factors that made me feel, I guess, unprepared for the challenge I wanted to tackle. Yet, I was so passionate about the problem that it kept me going. And you don't need the alarm clock when you have this really strong sense of purpose. The 4 a.m. start is just obvious when you have that. So I guess to answer your question, I would say the way to overcome it is to take one day at a time, one step after the next. And even though things were massively overwhelming at the beginning, just doing the next right thing, day after day after day, made me, I guess, create that snowball effect that made me arrive at this point today where I'm about to launch and make my dream come true.
So it's really about starting with why.
Starting with why, and you have to scale, you have your big vision, your dream, your purpose, but you have to constantly travel between the big purpose to what is it that I can do today to make a step towards my dream? Who do I need to talk to next? And just keep going forever.
Yeah, it's a great message there in just taking action and actually just starting that journey. Will, that's something you're not unfamiliar with yourself. And I think when we heard from Will's deep personal story today and personal experience with depression and mental health, that to me sort of spells a deep why. It gave you a great opportunity to deeply understand a problem, but then respond to that with some highly innovative systems, solutions, campaigns, ways of tackling this. So perhaps, for some of us it might be easier to find that deep purpose. For some of us, we might still be on the journey now, sort of finding our place. What advice would you give around that purpose piece? But also, if having that purpose and deep understanding of a problem is key to tackling an issue, are there any specific tools, methodologies, or processes that you would recommend to our audience today to help them with their specific challenges?
It's a lot to unpack there.
It is. Good luck.
All right, first piece, the purpose piece. I think Taj, put it really well about some people come into life early on and know what they want to do, and it's a very lucky thing to have that. I would caveat with I would acknowledge that yes, I found my purpose in life. That said, we started and I was in my early 20s. I'm now approaching my mid-30s, scarily. And I kind of found something that I thought, this is interesting, I want to do this. This is fun, it makes me feel like I'm giving something back, I feel like a reason, a purpose. But it wasn't until I was about 28 that I went, oh, this is how I do that. This is how I can actually make a living out of this. This is how we can actually make this sustainable. So that takes time. And then it took probably a couple more years to actually execute on that. And so I would say, finding your purpose, pay attention to what you think about most often. If there's something rattling around in your brain, it's probably because you care a lot about that and you think it's stupid that that thing exists or hasn't been solved. And so look into that. That said, it is okay to just live your life. I think that we get often caught up with this notion that everybody has to start something or solve the world's problems, etc. And yes, we should all play a role. And I believe very much in being a good citizen and a good human being for our community. Do the right thing, be kind, be responsible, leave the place better than you found it. But it's also okay to go to your job, do the best thing that you can, go home, watch The Bachelor, if you want, and just try to be a good person. Yeah. And as Camille pointed out in her talk, investigate your decisions and the byproducts of your life, but it is okay just to have a life. The second piece about how do you actually use your experiences, look, that is, I think as I try to make the point, you can turn, if life gives you lemons, make lemonade, and that's basically what I did. Yeah. And I would say we often try and minimize the experiences we've had that are negative and don't think about them. And if that's what you need to do, more power to you, please, there's no pressure. But I would say that there are at least 10 people around you that wish that they knew you'd been through that thing too. And so that might be a catalyst for you to use that. Again, one caveat with that statement, which I'm full of, understands that your perspective is your perspective. We have a project at the moment in Spur looking at the over 72 countries in the world where it's illegal or death penalty worthy to be gay. Over half of our company is of the LGBT community, and I'm not. And so when we lead a project in Spur, we always have a really serious conversation about who is the best person to lead this, whose voices should be in this project, and who should be there as a black hat or somebody to help, but it's not my place to tell that community what they need. And so my point is just, yes, use your perspectives, but understand that you have your own life. There are other needs, intersectionality that require different solutions.
Yeah, it's a fantastic piece for all of us to be considering on that daily basis, the diversity, the inclusion, and ultimately designing with and not designing for our communities.
Definitely.
So Sabrina, I might cross to you now quickly. You have ultimately found, I feel, a deep purpose in your work as well. But you've been quite successful in forming a range of different partnerships. And I think any of us in the room can understand that this can sometimes be quite a challenge, and sometimes a partner that we work with may be different to what we had expected. So challenges can arise. But in mixing that deep purpose with that of your partners, do you have any advice or thoughts for our audience around creating partnerships? And are there any examples of those that will just typically work really well off the bat versus those that you might need to trust your intuition on?
Sure. Well, I think, first of all, that probably the biggest challenge, in starting anything is that we live in a very neoliberal, individualistic society. And I think, beyond every other challenge, we are the generation that has been raised in this neoliberal society where it's just ourselves and our ego, is let's be the next unicorn, startup, etc. So I think that culturally we have to break down that. And once we start breaking down that, then we can be open to understand, what's around us, who's around us in terms of organization or individuals. I also feel the partnership should be, a win-win. That's what a partnership is not just asking from someone else. And I think what pushed me maybe seeking those relationships out there was that if you work especially in the not-for-profit sector, usually the financial capital is really low or inexistent. But the reality is that we also have to shift our mindset on which other kind of wealth in terms of, a space or relationship, or which other kind of support can we get out of there. But I do think, that going back to my presentation, that recreating the commons is a process, is not, sharing just things. And we have to work with that, on everyday activities. And unfortunately, in my lifetime across, probably Europe and Australia, we can see also that the public administration, which I think is the best commons we still have alive, is getting lost slowly by privatizing services, by externalizing. So this is the commons we have to fight for, really, if we want to push and create meaningful jobs so that not just us, but the next generation or other people that are less privileged can get into. And yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, Sabrina. I think there's some really deep learnings we can take from that. And I've got this battle in my mind right now because I'm hearing Will talk a little bit about going home and it being okay to watch The Bachelor. That in itself is actually quite a battle.
Not validating The Bachelor.
But I think really when we combine that with the relentless sort of hard work that is required to start any of these side hustles or being an entrepreneur in your organisations, it's bloody hard work. So when we get challenged by Taj, for example, to work or have that time at the beginning and end of our days, I start to get these questions come up around the prevalent burnout that I am seeing with many of the entrepreneurs. Many of them are actually the social, purpose-led entrepreneurs that we work with, because there is a bigger question here about how we balance doing the hard work with our lifestyles, taking care of our families. So Taj, you're young, you've got a lot of energy, and you're building some really quick experience and leadership in this space. What thoughts do you have around combating burnout and ultimately getting the work done whilst keeping some balance?
Yeah, definitely. Alrighty. Well, I think as entrepreneurs, when we have our highs, they're a lot higher than the average human being. In turn, when we have our lows, they're a lot lower than the average human being. When we talk about burnout in particular, I think I am probably in the very early phase of my burnout time, and I've learned to understood when that actually turns on.
Yep.
For the last month, we've had many staff short, and you're working 7 days a week, 10 hours a day. And it does ultimately, as we all know, at some point take its toll.
Yep.
For me, I think the warning signs for me is when I don't want to wake up in the morning. I love the mornings. I love going for a run in the morning. I love being active in the morning. That stopped because when you're working late and waking up early, you don't really want to have, you want to maximize your time in bed. And I think for me, it's just creating that pattern, knowing when I'm about to hit burnout phase and then go run onto a holiday. But in order to prevent it, start integrating certain elements into my day, small things like waking up in the morning. Like we've all heard it, this is not new stuff, but having that consistent wake up time, right? Even if it's 6:30, 7, whatever works for you, make it consistent on weekends as well. Having that time for exercise, keep yourself accountable, having an accountability buddy, whether it's tapping the neighbor next door and saying, how about we both wake up at 6:30? If you don't wake up, I'll door knock you. If I don't wake up, you door knock me. Just having that form of structure in your day that allows you to kind of have some wind down / relaxation, time to split your work day up. But it is tough. I think you said it quite well. Starting a business, being part of an impact generating business in particular, is a tough job. But if you love it, you'll find a way, and you'll find a way to put in strategies to make sure you don't hit bottom all the time.
Yeah, some great thoughts. Sabrina?
Can I add to that? I'm really interested in policy changes, and as you probably know, the prosperity of our economies now is based on GDP, the gross domestic product, which basically measure how productive and consumerist the society is. But let's imagine if the prosperity of a nation would be based on how much free time people have. There's a lot of policy tools that can actually be implemented as a system to avoid that we have to burn out. There's the universal basic income caps, the circulation of money that, expires. So there's a lot of literature out there, and I feel that we're not being brave enough to consider these as real options, because I hate waking up early and forget at 4 a.m. And the last thing I want is actually a hustle. I think we need to create meaningful activities rather than saying, okay, you do this meaningless job for your active day, and then you try to buy your consciousness out those evening and morning. So that's where all of you have probably more power than all of us in changing that policy structure around what we use our time as society for.
Yeah, some great thoughts there. Will, Camille, did you want to add to that?
Agreed, basically. I think you're all here because you either wanted the free or paid breakfast, or you want to talk about purpose and ethics and responsibility in society.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing, and it's quite addictive as well to want to improve things. And couple that with the startup economy that has been created, where we've glamorized entrepreneurship, which, as a quick rant aside, entrepreneurship didn't used to be that glamorous. It was more about creating jobs and bettering your society, but that's a whole other conversation. I totally agree with Taj. Like, the only way that we could get to where we were was initially to, I hate the term, but hustle as much as we could. But I strongly believe there is a limit to that sustainably for any individual. And it depends, of course, on your unique situation, where you have to say, I can't hustle 24/7 the rest of my life. I need to figure out what I can do and what I want to do, rather than believing that we all have to have a day job and a side hustle and do things constantly. I think we've painted ourselves into a corner of consume as much as possible to have status and to look as busy as possible to have status. And I think that's a very dangerous path to go down.
Some great thoughts there. Sorry, Camille.
Yeah, I might just add a small comment to whoever in this room might feel like they are entering this burnout phase sometimes. I have shifted my mindset a few years ago from managing my time to managing my energy. And this is the secret. This is the secret. Some days, you're better off just staying in bed because you're just not ready to work. And some days you will power through until midnight and you have the floor in. I'm not saying that you always have to, do whatever you feel like doing. Some days you just have to do what you have to do. But when you shift from time to energy management, you get more out of your day. You can spot the activities and the connections that are draining you, and you can eliminate that from your life. And this is how you start operating at a higher level. And I just observed this whilst looking at entrepreneurs. And I always thought, how do they do it? They are always on and they do these events and they run their teams and they move from one thing to the next. That's because they are doing what energizes them. So yeah, that's just my tip.
Thanks, Camille. And look, before we get into our activities as tables, we have one last question that I'm just keen to bounce and reflect on, because, Will, you spoke about starting a not-for-profit and then ultimately finding some difficulties in being able to sustain that. Going for government meetings and giving that advice, but finding a vehicle. We all know that social enterprise, ultimately that's business for good, a business that reinvests a lot of their profit back into fulfilling their purpose, that is for common good, is hugely on the rise. We know this. We know this through our interviews. I think you will have all seen it in the media as well. So are there any reflections on why that social enterprise model is perhaps emerging more strongly than a not-for-profit one? And from a government perspective as well, how might governments engage more with social enterprise or learn more about this space so that this social procurement opportunity is not missed? Who would like to take it? Sabrina.
Well, I don't know, probably a guess is that if social enterprise movement is growing is because we can't hide that capitalism is failing us anymore. So it's probably just a natural transition of that. And I want to be realistic though, because I feel that a lot of businesses are greenwashing people, in the sense that, this big corporation trying to have a social and ecological purpose while not accounting for the externalities. So as much as we have great social enterprises in Queensland, in Australia, doing the hard work, and probably are the less visible ones, we also have, this kind of social washing and greenwashing, thinking of unpacking or repacking, capitalism for good. So I think, we really have to be strict about that. And probably government and other institutions should be more strict about who they choose to work with and how they account for that and how they can prioritize indeed real social and ecological outcomes before, jobs and stuff. I realized with the tool library, for example, Sometimes they ask me, oh, how many jobs you're gonna actually, create? And obviously that is part of our mission, and we have a big team, we're all volunteers. But sometimes when you do something ethically, that takes more time. So you can't deliver on the same, time frame than an organization that externalized, that delocalized production in other countries to use slavery and create damages. So we need really to have time to develop something solid and ethics so that Brisbane can thrive on that, and it's not just a fashionable business ideas, going on stage today and maybe next year being forgotten.
Thank you, Sabrina. We have time for one quick comment from someone else. Social enterprise. Why is it on the rise? What can we do to support?
Very quick story. A few years ago, I was helping a brilliant young guy called Dean Foley set up an Indigenous Business Accelerator. And the idea that he had was Indigenous businesses are 100 times more likely to hire an Indigenous person. And so let's create Indigenous Lorna Janes, Richard Bransons. And he was a brilliant, passionate guy, and he was lucky to receive some mentorship from a very wealthy Brisbaneite. And we sat in this meeting, and there was a decision to be made about, are you going to be a non-profit or a for-profit? Yep. And this wealthy man said to him, mate, choose carefully, because if you go for-profit, you'll make stacks of money, it'll be great. If you go non-profit, you'll be Australian of the Year, but you'll be dead broke the rest of your life. And I think that's bullshit. And I think that the social enterprise emergence or resurgence is a response to that we've been told that those are two binary choices, and they're not. But instead, you can do good for the planet and for our people and make a good living at the same time. And that is what I believe social enterprise really is.
Great. It's a great reflection there, Will. Thank you.